Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today, we are beginning the first of two parts of the final leg of Volume 8 in the 10-volume collection of Emerson's journals. This is journal collection number 46, and it dates from the year 1855, and if you've been listening along with me, we are up to age 52. That's how old Emerson is at this time. And as always, it begins with a biographical sort of update from the editors, which I will read now. For journal writing, there was scant time when the winter's arduous and exposing work of lecturing began. Quote, Whisked by the stormy wing of fate out of my chain and whirled like a dry leaf through the state of New York, as Mr. Emerson put it in a letter to Carlyle. During December he lectured, mostly before Massachusetts lyceums, almost every other evening. In January 13 were given, still in New England towns, only two of them in Boston, one of these being his strong protest against advancing slavery and its demoralization of the North. The same lecture was given in Philadelphia, and 17 on various themes in the Middle States, one in Hamilton, Ontario, during February. Returning home in March, 11 more were read before New England audiences. End note. Here follows a poem. Success shall be in thy courser tall, success in thyself, which is best of all, success in thy hand, success in thy foot, in struggle with man, in battle with brute. The holy God and Saint Draughten dear shall guide and bless thee through thy career. Look out, Svend Vonved. From the Danish George Borrow. February 1855. They laughed us down. They treated the rule of right as puerile enthusiasm. We sacrificed the convenient, the pleasant, the expedient to the right. The real struggle of Europe is for two things. One, nationality. Two, morality, as the fundamental guide of statesmanship. Republicanism not being the end desired, but as the only means possible. And to the listener, here follows a untranslated French quotation of Confucius. So that obviously I cannot read. Don't attempt too many things. Unlimited activity is bankruptcy. Against the absurdity of expense, we set up the beauty of manners. They think it becoming in a gentleman to spend much for his dinner. We think it becoming to spend little for his dinner, much for his brain. Man feels the antipodes and the pole. They are his like the drops of his blood. Revere self. Every thought not only a fount of a man and his career, but will have its glorification in the grand man, its star and its age. Who are you that you should desert it? It will have its literature and art yet. Alum is wanted in the strata, and so is marl and phosphorus. Romulus threw his spear into the Palatine hill. The spear took root and became a tree. Rome, New York, February 18th. What occurred this morning touching the imagination? In meeting a new student, I inclined to ask him, Do you know any deep man? Has anyone furnished you with a new image? For to see the world representatively implies high gifts. Editor's note. Here first appears the poem The Romany Girl, almost as in its finished form in the poems. End note. The sun goes down, and with him takes the coarseness of my poor attire. The fair moon mounts, and the flame of gypsy beauty blazes higher, etc. History is all party pamphlets. Lingard for Catholics, Hume for Tories, Hallam for Whigs, Brodie for Radicals. Mitford writes Greek history for monarchists, Grote for Republicans. Dance. Under the soul of the world, quote, the bodies are moved in a beautiful manner as being parts of the whole, but certain things are corrupted in consequence of not being able to sustain the order of the whole. Just as if, in a great dance which is conducted in a becoming manner, a tortoise being caught in the middle of the progression should be trod upon, not being able to escape the order of the dance. Though if the tortoise had arranged itself with the dance, it would not have suffered from those that composed it. Plotinus. Fortune and hope, I've made my port. Farewell, ye twin deceivers. Ah, many a time I've been your sport. Go cozen new believers. Then there are two Greek words untranslated. Utica, February 11th. Ah, how few things! A warm room and morning leisure. I sit by the holy river and watch the waves. Will it not cease to flow for me? I need not ask for more. Let them ask for results and externals, they who have not this source. Minima pars sui puella, and there's a translation of that which states, the girl is the least part of herself, and then it's attributed questioningly to Horace. I do not know that I am ready, like my dervish in his more total devotion, to throw my babes into the stream. No, I am householder and father and citizen, far too much for that. But what blazing evidence his vices so esteemed afford the pure beauty that intoxicates him? How far better his outward shiftlessness and insensibility to what are reckoned the primary claims than the Bulwer view of intellect as a sort of bill of exchange easily convertible into fine chambers, wines, and cigars. Of him, that is, of the dervish by the river, I think this morning most respectfully when I remember his magnanimity, unparalleled, I think, among men of his class, that he truly loves the thought and wishes its widest publication, and gladly hears his own from the lips of other men. What a fact, too, when Higginson went to the courthouse, having made up his mind that he should not return thence, the only man that followed him into it was Alcott. When we read the criticism, it may be right or wrong, we side with it. We think the critic may be in the right, but it is quickly forgotten. And long afterward we must still go back to London for the wise remark, imagery, the wit, the indignation that are unforgettable. The rule of positive and superlative is this: as long as you deal with the sensible objects in the sphere of sense, call things by their right names. But every man may be, and some men are, raised to a platform whence he sees beyond sense to moral and spiritual truth, when he no longer sees snow as snow, or horses as horses, but only sees or names them representatively for those interior facts which they signify. This is the way the poets use them, and in that exalted state the mind deals very easily with great and small material things, and strings worlds like beads upon its thought. The success with which this is done can alone determine how genuine is the inspiration. France. Alfieri said, the character of the French consists in not having one. Kossuth's remark contrasts the pound and shilling system of English army promotion with the opportunity of the French soldier who finds the materials of a marshal's staff in his own knapsack. A man's manners, to be radiant, must announce his reality. His wealth is inexhaustible only in his proper vein. On every other ground he soon acquaints you with all his collections, tour de force. People fatigue us because they are apes and drilled. Make a man happy by gratifying his powers with their legitimate objects and activity, and you make him strong. Subjectiveness. Governor Reynolds of Illinois said, the people were always right. One said, but they crucified our Savior. Were they right then? The governor looked about him and then replied, yes, they were right then, for if they had not crucified him, he could not have been our Savior. This may serve as one out of 1,000 examples that every proposition is true, or may be made true by an act of wit. Men ride on a thought, as if each bestrode an invisible horse, which, if it became visible, all their seemingly mad plunging motions would be explained. England. When my eyes opened, I found I was jogging between the narrowest walls and seeing nothing else, and that I had mistaken those walls of the lane for England. Thus, the religion of England, is it the establishment? Lord Lyndhurst said, quote, "The man who has nothing must be a radical to get what other people have. He who has something must be a conservative to keep it." End quote. I prefer a little integrity to any career. Reality the charm of a good novel like Villette. February 24th. But 2 good nights in a fortnight, one at Buffalo, the second at Hamilton, Ontario, and finding myself in England, as it seemed, with English soft coal fire, my fine warm parlour hung round with Wilkie prints, and with Barrage's print of a champion course at Amesbury, with English servant and the hotel full of a solid Englishman, talking London politics in the dear island tones. Honorable Hugh Cameron complimented me on the essay on friendship. Curious to see these men standing there with Bibles open, fiercely defending Old Bailey Christianity with finger on text. Coarse and cruel men, constables and grocers, every feature and tone being only a placard. Beware of pickpockets, and they fancying that we only know them by the text they quote and the words they articulate. Quote, "May you lie down in that peace which escapeth explanation, and rise to the duties which go with the peace." Aunt Mary to Elizabeth Hoare. Quote, "To move the reader deeply, the author must be in perfect repose." Niebuhr. Niebuhr lost his divination for some years, and it returned to him. It is as easy to twist beams of iron as candy braids, if only you take all the steps, as the machine shop can show you each step is simple and easy, and geology shows it's just as easy to bend and twist and braid strata of ores, basalt, porphyry, and granite as to make anchors. Geology shows the steps. 'Tis clear that the European is a better animal than the American. Here you can only have Webster or Parsons or Washington at the first descent from a farmer or people's man. Their sons will be mediocrities, but in England, in Europe, the privileged classes shall continue to furnish the best specimens. The czars of Russia shall continue to be good stock. I look on the homage paid by men to a great man as the expression of their hope. Natural history. Radiation is the lesson of natural history. Every one of these monsters, a lizard, a mouse, a crocodile, a baboon, is only some function of mind magnified. From your center, nature carries every integral part out to the horizon and mirrors yourself to you in the universe. Yet the effect of a museum of natural history is not to help and inspire us, but rather to mortify by gigantizing these limitations. These are the Titans that warred with Jove, and he only saved himself by the skin of his teeth. Natural history builds up from oyster and tadpole. Mythology gives us down from the heavens. Beauty is the quality which makes to endure. Greeks. 'Tis strange what immortality is in their very rags. So much mentality about the race has made every shred durable. We run very fast, but here is this horrible Plato at the end of the course, still abreast of us. Our novelties we can find all in his book. He has anticipated our latest neology. The history says the Romans conquered the Greeks, but I analyze the Roman language, I read the Roman books, I behold the Roman buildings, I dig up marbles in the Roman gardens, and I find Greeks everywhere still paramount in art, in thought, and in my history the Greeks conquered Rome. Landor is a man of wit and versatile powers, who by pure affluence of his own wit creates a Parnassus about him, is independent of his times, and seems like a king on his travels with his court about him. He is the steadfast friend of liberty and honor. Then what to say of Tennyson? When I read Maud, then I say, here is one of those English heads again, such as in the Elizabethan days, were rammed full of delightful fancies. What coloring like Titian, color like the dawn. Rhyme and rhetoric. As boys write verses from delight in the music or rhyme, before they learn to delight in the sense, so when grown older they write from love of the rhetoric, sooner than for the argument, and in most instances a sprightly genius chooses the topic and treatment that gives him room to say fine things before the sad heroic truth. Chaucer and Chapman had legs and trunk to their poetry. The poem was a finer man, and had all the parts of a man. But these young fine wits who write exquisite verses now, quote, the brain of a purple mountain, etc., their poetry has no legs. Quotation. What I said in one of my soddy scraps of verse, I might say in good sooth, that thus the high muse treated me, directly never greeted me, but when she spread her dearest spells, feigned to speak of someone else. I was free to overhear, or I might at will forbear, but that casual word, thus at random overheard, was the symphony of spheres, and proverb of 1,000 years. My best thought came from others. I heard in their words my own meaning, but a deeper sense than they put on them, and could well and best express myself in other people's phrases, but to finer purposes than they knew. Quote, he that borrows the aid of an equal understanding, said Burke, doubles his own. He that uses that of a superior elevates his own to the stature of that he contemplates. Common fame. I trust a good deal to common fame, as we all must. If a man has good corn, or wood, or boards, or pigs to sell, or can make better chairs or knives, crucibles, or church organs than anybody else, you will find a broad, hard-beaten road to his house, though it be in the woods. And if a man knows the law, people find it out, though he live in a pine shanty, and resort to him. And if a man can pipe or sing, so as to wrap the prisoned soul in an Elysium, or can paint landscape, and convey into oils and ochres all the enchantments of spring or autumn, or can liberate or intoxicate all people who hear him with delicious songs and verses, 'tis certain that the secret cannot be kept. The first witness tells it to a second, and men go by 5s and 10s and 50s to his door. What a signal convenience is fame! Well, it is still so with a thinker. If he proposes to show me any high secret, if he profess to have found the profoundly secret path that leads from fate to freedom, all good heads and all mankind aspiringly and religiously wish to know it, and though it sorely and unusually taxes their poor brain, they find out at last whether they have made the transit or no. If they have, they will know it, and his fame will surely be bruited abroad. If they come away unsatisfied, though it be easy to impute it, even in their belief, to their dullness in not being able to keep step with his snowshoes on the icy mountain paths, I suspect it is because the transit has not been made. 'Tis like that crooked hollow log through which the farmer's pig found access to the field. The farmer moved the log so that the pig, in returning to the hole and passing through, found himself, to his astonishment, still on the outside of the field. He tried it again, and was still outside. Then he fled away, and would never go near it again. Whatever transcendent abilities Fichte, Kant, Schelling, and Hegel have shown, I think they lack the confirmation of having given a piggy transit to the field. The log is very crooked, but still leaves Grumpy on the same side of the fence he was before. If they had made the transit, common fame would have found it out. So I abide by my rule of not reading the book until I hear of it through the newspapers. Our Concord mechanics and farmers are very doubtful on the subject of culture, and will vote against you, but I notice they will all send their children to the dancing school. They are rather deaf on the subject of mental superiority, but they value the multiplication table and decimal fractions and theodolites and surveying and navigation. They value reading and writing. February. Philip Randolph was surprised to find me speaking to the politics of anti-slavery in Philadelphia. I suppose because he thought me a believer in general laws, and that it was a kind of distrust of my own general teachings to appear in active sympathy with these temporary heats. He is right so far as that it is becoming in the scholar to insist on central soundness rather than on superficial applications. I am to give a wise and just ballot, though no man else in the republic doth. I am not to compromise or mix or accommodate. I am to demand the absolute right, affirm that, and do that, but not push Boston into a false, showy, and theatrical attitude, endeavoring to persuade her she is more virtuous than she is. Thereby I am robbing myself more than I am enriching the public. After 20, 50, 100 years, it will be quite easy to discriminate who stood for the right and who for the expedient. The vulgar, compromising ranks on ranks of fine gentlemen, clergymen, college presidents, and professors, and great democratic statesmen bellowing for liberty, will of course go for safe degrees of liberty, that is, will side with property against the spirit, subtle and absolute, which keeps no terms. Monroe seriously asked what I believe of Jesus and prophets. I said, as so often, that it seemed to me an impiety to be listening to one and another, when the pure heaven was pouring itself into each of us, on the simple condition of obedience. To listen to any second-hand gospel is perdition of the first gospel. Jesus was Jesus because he refused to listen to another and listened at home. August. Out upon scholars with their pale, sickly, etiolated indoor thoughts. Give me the out-of-door thoughts of sound men, the thoughts all fresh, blooming. For the great poets, like the Greek artists, elaborated their designs, but slighted their finish, and it is the office of poets to suggest a vast wealth, a background, a divinity out of which all this and much more readily springs. And if this religion is in the poetry, it raises us to some purpose, and we can well afford some staidness or gravity in the verses. Prima Philosophia. Quote, dissolvers of fate, Iamblichus. Quote, how can the soul be adjacent to the one, except by laying asleep the garrulous matter that is in her? Proclus. Quote, eternal beings only have a real existence. Proclus, Providence and Fate, 2, 464. Quote, in the last natures there are representations of such as are first, and all things sympathize with all. Proclus. Quote, while life everywhere resounds, the most abject beings may be said to retain a faint echo of the melody produced by the mundane lyre. Taylor's Proclus, 2, 395. Quote, life is that which holds matter together. Porphyry. Then there are two untranslated Greek words, and English follows though, and I'll read it. For flowing is the secret of things, and no wonder the children love masks. A mythology discerning the eternal from the transitory, called ideas gods, and availing itself of that oblivion which accompanies any mind raised above the comprehension of his contemporaries, for he speaks as a man among oxen, easily imputed the strange imaginative words he dropped to oracles and gods. The Chaldean oracles are plainly all esoteric metaphysics and ethics of a deep thinker speaking after truth, and not after appearance, and using whatever images occurred to convey his grand perception. Then Proclus says, with perfect naivete, Hence the gods exhort to understand the forerunning form of light, etc., citing the Chaldean oracles. Memory. Connecting inconceivable mystery with inconceivable mystery. In children, thought is slow, therefore time is long. You shall hear, as soon as they are well into frocks and trousers, the young remembers begins to say, "Don't you remember how we used to do this and that?" as if recalling great spaces of time, and it was only a few months, or maybe last year. These geologies, chemistries, astronomies leave us where they found us. The invention is of great use to the inventor, but harms the pupil, whom it hinders from helping himself. The facts that science collects are of no value to any but the owner. Mother wit animates mountains of facts by turning them to human use, milking the cow, suspending the lodestone, pouring human will and human wit through things till the world is a second self, blushes with shame, laughs with health, is a temple of religion. But the moment these facts fall to dull man, they are like steel filings when the magnet is withdrawn. 'Tis science in England, science in America, very jealous of theory. A house held up by magnetism draws out the magnet, and the house falls and buries the inhabitant. Percival, transcribed by Robert de Thornton in the 15th century. Give lithes to me 2 words or 3 of one that was fair and free, and fell in his fight. His right name was Percival, he was fostered in the fell, he drank water of the well, and yet he was white. Passion. When wrath and terror changed Jove's regal port, and the rash leaping thunderbolt fell short. Nature. What we ask of her is only words to clothe our thoughts. The mind is to find the thought. Chemistry, geology, hydraulics are secondary. The atomic theory is, of course, only an interior process produced, as the geometers say, or the outside effect of a foregone metaphysical theory. Hydrostatics only the surecoat of ideal necessities. Yet the thoughts are few, the forms many, the large vocabulary or many-colored coat of the indigent unity. The savants are very chatty and vain, but hold them hard to principle and definition, and they become very mute and nearsighted. What is motion? What is beauty? What is life? What is force? Push them hard, drive them home. They will not be loquacious. I have heard that Peirce, the Cambridge mathematician, had come to Plato at last. 'Tis clear that the invisible and imponderable is the sole fact. Quote, "Why changes not the violet earth into musk?" asks Hafitz. What is the term of this overflowing metamorphosis? I do not know what are the stoppages, but I see that an all-dissolving unity changes all that which changes not. 'Tis a fine fable for the advantage of character over talent, the strife of Jove and Phoebus. The aim is ever to frame an answer that does not admit of an answer, but there is no such answer frameable. Your cattle have broke into my woodlot and browsed the trees, says the gentleman. The cattle must be damned fools, replies the farmer, to browse on pine trees when there's good grass in the road. Cattle are damned fools, returned the gentleman. The judge said at Salem, the law is so and so, and ruled the evidence out. Webster asked a rehearing. If that be law, said Mr. Webster, then it were better to run a plowshare under the foundations of this courthouse. And Webster got a reversed ruling, and Coleman's evidence admitted. Quote, I have great respect for the opinions of Lord Camden. I was bred to a high esteem for his learning and wisdom, but in regard to the point in question, I differ from Lord Camden, said Webster. Quote, at last Goodrich was put upon the stand, and as soon as I looked him in the face, I saw that he had not been robbed. With my first question I brought him, and in 20 minutes there was not a person in the courthouse who did not know that no robbery had been committed, said Webster, who had perceived casually in a stagecoach from Jacob Perkins the opinion that Goodrich had wounded his own hand. House hunting. Everything is on the street. Highways run through nature, as in the human body the veins percolate to every spot. You cannot prick with the finest needle anywhere but you draw blood. The young people do not like the town, do not like the seashore. They will go inland, find a dear cottage deep in the mountains, secret as their hearts. They set forth on their travels in search of a home. The youth must leave home. He must hide in the forest. He departs for Katahdin or Moosehead Lake. He cannot get enough alone to write to his friend, to worship his beloved. He finds, after much search, the Italy flies faster than he. He chases a rainbow. Culture is for the results. The best of education, the generalizations we make of our school, and manipulating processes. We early find that one thing only translates another, that we draw the same ultimate knowledge from 20 studies, from 20 arts. It needs the apt scholar capable of the lesson, and the school, the text, is indifferent. You must begin at the beginning, and you must take all the steps in order. Only so shall you do the feat in whichever art you select. The past is worshipped and the morrow prized. Today, what doth it be so despised? Future or past no stricter mystery folds. O friendless present, than thy bosom holds. Milton was abstemious of praise, and how odious are most dedications with their adulatory personalities, in Bacon, in Pliny the Elder, in Martial, in Horace, in Hafitz only, the genial heaven-daring courage with which he sets his Shah beside, and even above. Allah makes us pardon the flattery for the poetry. Excellent is the courageous treatment. The lover delights in the surprise of face and form yet so dearly related to him. The more foreign, the better. The lady's eye seemed always looking at distant lands and distant people. She could never be domesticated. It was like a young deer or a young leopard or a forest bird newly caught and brought into your yard. Still descend to him, prefer him, but for heaven's sake do not lose this exotic charm, which fills his imagination. Far capitals and marble courts her eye still seemed to see, minstrels and dames and high-born men, and of the best that can be. It is on the completeness with which metrical forms have covered the whole circle of routinary experience that improvisation is possible to a rhymer familiar with the cyclus of forms, and quick and dexterous in combining them. Most poetry, stock poetry we call it, that we see in the magazines is nothing but this mosaic work done slowly. But whether is improvisation of poetry possible, as well as this ballad mongering? Yes, no doubt, since geniuses have existed, we will not be disloyal or hopeless. But beside the strange power implied of passing at will into the state of vision and of utterance, is required huge means, vast health and vigor and celerity. Ellery Channing's poetry has the merit of being genuine, and not the metrical commonplaces of the magazine, but it is painfully incomplete. He has not kept faith with the reader. 'Tis shamefully indolent and slovenly. He should have lain awake all night to find the true rhyme for a verse, and he has availed himself of the first one that came, so that it is all a babyish incompleteness. Walter Scott is the best example of this mastery of metrical commonplaces that makes vulgar improvisation. I am to read Guizot, Love and Marriage, or at least Lady Russell. The song of 1596 says, "The wife of every Englishman is counted blessed." Ritson. Bring me home no beef, for that is full of bones, but bring me home good ale enow, 'tis bread and milk at once. Ritson. Hafitz. O follow, O see the sonnet's flight, thou seest a fleet career, O child begotten a night, that travels 1,000 year. The chief fact in history of the world is the penury with which the stream of thought runs. In 500 years, millions and millions of men, and not 100 lines of poetry, though almost all of them have some ear and apprehension for poetry, and not a few try to write. Poetical persons hum a verse, and go as far as half a quatrain, which they cannot complete. Exaggerating people talk of moments when their brains seemed bursting with a multitude of thoughts. I believe they were mistaken. There was no danger. Yet nothing but thought is precious, and we must respect in ourselves this possibility, and abide its time. Jones Very, who thought it an honor to wash his own face, seems to me less insane than men who hold themselves cheap. Let us not be such that our thoughts should disdain us. If I could find that a perfect song could form itself in my brain, I should indulge it and pamper it as bees their queen. Hour follows hour, and eternity eternity, without doubt for the believer. A man bears belief as a tree bears apples. Life expensive, but probably was always, only we forget the shillings as we do the vermin. The present race are wanted for 50 years, the idealist for always. There is never a fine aspiration, but is on its way to its body or institution. Look up Kant on history. Bias. The writer who draws on his proper talent can neither be overshadowed nor supplanted. The oak may grow as beautifully and as vastly as it will. It never can take a ray of beauty from the palm, and both of them at their best will only set off the beauty of the pine or the elm. Opposition is our belt and tonic. No opinion will pass but must stand the tug of war. Men wish to pay homage to courage and perseverance, to a man whose steps have no choice, but are planted each one. We know the austere law of liberty, that it must be reconquered day by day, that it subsists in a state of war, that it is always slipping away from those who boast it, to those who fight for it. In race, it is not the broad shoulders or litheness or stature that give advantage. I find the writing and speaking of Englishmen in Elizabeth's, James, and Charles I and II's days to have a greater breadth, and at the same time more delicacy with a negligent greatness than any since George I came in. Americans are hardly bred sufficiently to read and apprehend the sweetness of Mrs. Hutchinson, of Pierpont, of Lady Russell, of Vane, of Herbert, and of Kenelm Digby. The Englishman is wont to esteem his pocket a place of sanctity, a hold which no human hand but his own is allowed to enter. The habit of putting into it increases the passion to fill it, which day by day creeps on the man until I fear at last he comes to value his mind as another pocket, into which no one ever goes but himself, and valuable for that reason. He can put away there what he does not like to have seen, and it is subservient to the first. Newton. Dr. Boerhaave said of him, quote, that man comprehends as much as all mankind besides. Newton said of Dr. Mackin, quote, that his head never ached but when he was studying the lunar irregularities. And when Dr. Halley pressed him to complete his theory of the moon, he replied, quote, that it made his head ache and kept him awake so often that he would think of it no more. He afterwards told Conduit, quote, that if he lived till Halley made 6 years' observations, he would have another stroke at the moon. Newton composed his chronology at Cambridge, where he was in the habit, he said, quote, of refreshing himself with history and chronology when weary of other studies. Leibniz said that he had consulted all the learned in Europe upon some difficult points without having any satisfaction, and that when he applied to Sir Isaac he wrote him in answer by the first post to do so, and then he would find it. Bishop Burnet valued Newton for having the whitest soul he ever knew. Nature shows everything once, somewhere, and large. Your earthquake is the first chemist, goldsmith, and brazier. He wrought to purpose in his craters before men borrowed the hint in their crucibles. Baal called the marine remains in mountain and mine the metals of the deluge. Mr. Owen saw the fibrous or tubular structure of the teeth of the mastodon. The microscope showed this to be a universal fact. Hunter saw in the snail that the snail was to its shell as the pulp is to a tooth. Flamsteed will cause his man to calculate more synopses of the moon's places, both from the observations and tables as, quote, soon as observed, whereby it will be soon evident whether the heavens will allow these new equations you introduce, end quote. Identities for intellect. Sallust's complaint that nobody will believe more than he can do himself, which is just. The universal belief that because you have such a form and organization as mine, point for point, you must believe as I do. If you do more than I, the worse for you. And science of today is homologies. Rig Veda Sanhita. Quote, who, Agni, among men is thy kinsman? Quote, Agni, fire, bring the gods awakening with the morning, thou accepted messenger of the gods, bearer of oblations, giver of dwellings, beloved of many, the smoke bannered, the light shedding. I praise Agni at the break of day, the best and youngest of the gods, the guest of man, exempt from death, preserver, the sacrificer. Juvenile Agni, whose flames delight, wafter of the burnt offering, resplendent Agni, visible to all, protector of people and villages, associate of man, lord of red coursers, son of strength. Place upon the grass the morning moving deities to drink the soma juice, for it was yesterday expressed. Quote, I invoke the lovely night and dawn to sit upon the sacred grass at this our sacrifice. Quote, mortals, you owe your daily birth to Indra, who, with the rays of the morning, gives sense to the senseless and to the formless form. The shedder of rain, the mighty lord, the always compliant, invests men with his strength as a bull defended a herd of kine. Quote, the hymn, the cause of increase, is to be repeated to Indra. Quote, Marut's winds, sportive without horses, borne by spotted deer, clouds, were born self-radiant with weapons, war cries, and decorations. I hear the cracking of the whips in their hands, wonderfully inspiring courage in the fight. Praise the sportive and resistless strength of the Maruts. Quote, which is the chief leader among you, agitators of heaven and earth, who shake all around like the top of a tree? At the roaring of the Maruts, every dwelling of the earth shakes. Quote, Maruts with strong hands come along the beautifully embanked rivers with unobstructed progress. May the felloes of your wheels be firm. Quote, utter the verse that is in your mouths. Spread it like a cloud spreading rain, chanting the measured hymn. Quote, Aswins, waters, long-armed bearers of wealth, guides of men, sit down on the sacred grass, affluent Aswins. Have you not ever drunk the soma juice? Come as a ship to bear us over the ocean of your praises. Ambrosia is in the waters, and the waters are medicinal herbs. End quote. Varuna. Quote, he who knows the path of the birds flying in the air, he abiding in the ocean knows also the course of ships. He who knows the path of the vast, the graceful, and the excellent wind, and who knows those who reside above. Through him the sage beholds all the marvels that have been or will be wrought. End quote. Quote, Vishnu traversed this world 3 times he planted his foot, and the whole world was collected in the dust of his footstep. End quote. In parentheses, the 3 steps are the present, the past, and the future. Quote, for the stars cast or inject their imagination or influence into the air, end quote, says Bayman. In youth we admire much in ourselves or in others as high individuality, which turns out later to be merely of temperament or of sex, and therefore extremely common. Cants. Another of the cants is the cant about banks. Ours is declared to be, says Sam Hooper, quote, the most perfect system of currency and banking in the world, end quote. The most audacious cant of Europe was, quote, the Holy Alliance, and of America, the extending the area of freedom, now manifest destiny and preservation of the Union, end quote. England has Wilkinson, Carlyle, Tennyson, Landor, Dickens, Thackeray, Hallam, Layard, Bulwer, Gladstone, Henry Drummond, Cobden, Chadwick, Stevenson, Owen. But what stout old fellows were Beattie, Camden, Newton, Hooke, Flamsteed, Fuller, Leyland, Hearn, Dodsworth, 162 volumes, Bale, Dugdale, Bryan, Walton, Coke, Littleton. An important defect in America, quote, the absence of a general education of the eye, end quote. Jacob Behmen's pictures are in the fine allegory of Book 9, Chapter 12, page 280, and they are only pleasing. This is the end of Part 1 of Emerson's journal collection number 46, dating from the year 1855, when the author was 52 years old. Thank you for listening.